Olympic snowboarder on the FBI's most wanted list, accused of running an international drug ring, now facing new federal.
One of the most prolific and violent drug trafficking organizations in this world.
In the pre-dawn darkness, a private Gulfstream G650 touched down at a Southern California airport. The temperature, barely above freezing, the tarmac, wet from overnight fog. To the ground crew, it looked like just another executive arrival, a sleek white jet with Mexican registration, probably carrying businessmen or tourists. But circling the airport were 3 unmarked FBI Suburbans, their engines idling in the shadows of a distant hangar. 73 federal agents had been positioned around the perimeter since the middle of the night. This wasn't a welcoming party. This was an extraction. But here's the uncomfortable part. Marcus Sullivan wasn't caught because the system worked. He was caught because it finally broke for him. The aircraft rolled to a stop. The cabin door opened, and stepping onto the stairs was a man who had been on the FBI's 10 most wanted list for over a decade. His name was Marcus Sullivan. For more than 11 years, this man didn't just evade the FBI. He exploited the blind spots of the entire U.S. justice system. What brought him down wasn't a gun or a raid. It was a failure inside the system he believed he controlled. Hours earlier, Marcus Sullivan had surrendered to U.S. officials at the American Embassy. After more than a decade of hiding, after ordering the executions of 7 witnesses and 2 rival cartel leaders, the former Olympic skier had finally run out of places to hide. But the arrest wasn't a victory. It was an admission. As Sullivan's feet touched American soil, FBI agents moved in. Handcuffs snapped shut. No words were exchanged. The man who once stood on an Olympic podium was now walking in shackles toward a federal holding cell. Welcome back. What you are witnessing is not just the collapse of the Snow Kings cartel. What you are witnessing is the exposure of how a single criminal learned to weaponize the safeguards that were supposed to stop him. Marcus Sullivan was born into privilege, Vail, Colorado. Father, real estate mogul. Mother, former downhill champion. By his early 20s, he was representing the United States at the Winter Olympics in men's downhill skiing. He finished in the middle of the pack. He had everything ahead of him. He walked away from it all. Months later, he was arrested in San Diego. Sullivan and 2 associates drove across the Mexican border with dozens of kilograms of cocaine hidden in a modified SUV. They met their distributor. He was an undercover FBI agent. Sullivan was convicted, sentenced to 4.5 years, served just over 3 years at a federal prison in California. But prison didn't break Marcus Sullivan. It educated him. By the time he walked free, Sullivan understood one thing clearly. The safest place to commit crimes was inside the rules. For 3 years, Sullivan studied how evidence was collected, how witnesses were protected, how money was traced. He studied the federal criminal justice system the way he once studied Olympic courses, mapping every weakness, every exploitable gap. Within months of his release, Sullivan vanished. He didn't return home. He disappeared into Latin America. And what he built there wasn't just a cartel. It was a blueprint for exploiting the system that tried to contain him. Years after his release, Marcus Sullivan resurfaced in Medellin, Colombia. He made contact with Diego Vasquez, a Sinaloa cartel logistics coordinator moving cocaine from Colombia to Mexico. Vasquez saw what Sullivan offered: access, American passport, perfect English, understanding of U.S. law enforcement patterns. But Sullivan brought something else: a playbook. Sullivan didn't build an empire by hiding from the system. He built it by learning how the system actually works. Within years, Sullivan's organization, the Snow Kings Cartel, was moving 47 metric tons of cocaine annually, from Colombia, through Mexico, into Los Angeles, Vancouver, and Toronto. Think about that. 47 tons. $1.4 billion in street value. Sullivan didn't need to corrupt the system. The system worked exactly as designed. He used legitimate shipping manifests. He exploited the fact that U.S. Customs only physically inspects 2% of commercial truck traffic. He calculated the odds, and he played them. Hidden in false compartments, cocaine. The money flowed back through shell companies and cryptocurrency. Sullivan didn't just launder money. He weaponized financial regulations. He created enough legitimate transactions to bury the illegal ones. For 7 years, this operated without interruption. Sullivan lived in luxury Guadalajara, Medellin, Panama City, armored SUVs, private security, because for 7 years, he was untouchable. And that's when the business model changed. Years into his operation, the Snow Kings cartel wasn't just moving drugs, it was eliminating threats. Sullivan adopted what federal prosecutors called systematic witness elimination. The first victim was Antonio Reyes, arrested in Los Angeles. Reyes agreed to testify against Sullivan in exchange for a reduced sentence. He was placed in protective custody at a federal detention center. Weeks later, Reyes was found dead in his cell. Official cause: heart attack. The autopsy revealed traces of a rare synthetic opioid, something that shouldn't exist inside a federal facility. A federal witness died inside a federal facility, and no one went to prison for it. The investigation stalled. No charges filed. The case quietly closed. A federal witness died in federal custody, and the system moved on. That wasn't just murder. That was a message, and the system received it. Federal prosecutors claimed insufficient evidence, but witnesses inside the system understood. Cooperation meant death, and the system couldn't protect you. The second victim was Michael Donovan, a Canadian truck driver recruited by Sullivan's network. Donovan was stopped at a North Dakota checkpoint. Agents found 140 kilograms of cocaine. Donovan cooperated within 48 hours. He provided detailed information: names, drop locations, payment schedules. He agreed to wear a wire. 2 weeks before his first undercover operation, Donovan was shot execution style in a Tim Hortons parking lot in Vancouver. The shooter was never identified. The investigation went cold. 2 witnesses, 2 murders, 0 convictions. That wasn't coincidence. That was policy by neglect. The third victim put Sullivan on the FBI's 10 most wanted list. Elena Morales, a financial accountant for one of Sullivan's shell companies, was scheduled to testify. She had access to bank records linking Sullivan to over $300 million in laundered proceeds. Her testimony would have been devastating. Sullivan didn't wait. Morales was leaving her apartment in Medellin when 2 gunmen on a motorcycle opened fire. She was struck 7 times. Colombian police arrested the shooters within 72 hours. They admitted they'd been hired through an encrypted app. Payment: $50,000 in Bitcoin. The order came from El Rey de Neve, the Snow King. Marcus Sullivan. Sullivan was added to the 10 most wanted list. Reward: $10 million, later increased to $15 million. The question federal agents couldn't answer: how had Sullivan reached inside a federal detention center? How had he located a witness in a Canadian safe house? How had he found Elena Morales in Colombia? The answer was simpler than anyone wanted to admit. He didn't need to hack the system. The system leaked itself. Someone knew where she lived. Someone had access to witness protection files. Someone went to work the next day. For over a decade, Marcus Sullivan evaded capture by staying mobile. Never more than 3 weeks in one location. Encrypted phones destroyed every 48 hours. Armed security sweeping every space for surveillance devices. But the FBI followed the money. Federal investigators partnered with the DEA, IRS, and Treasury to map Sullivan's financial empire. They traced cryptocurrency through mixers and tumblers. But for most of the hunt, the FBI wasn't chasing Sullivan. They were reacting to him. Every time they moved, someone inside the system moved faster. The breakthrough came when an investigator identified a pattern. Every 30 days, a Bitcoin wallet linked to Sullivan transferred exactly $200,000 to a Guadalajara real estate company. The company owned one property, a luxury compound in the hills. The FBI coordinated with Mexican authorities. They confirmed Sullivan was living there under the alias David Estrada. Before they could move in, Sullivan vanished. A corrupt state police official had tipped him off hours before the raid. This wasn't a leak. It was a paid service. The official who made that call collected a paycheck from the Mexican government and a second paycheck from someone else. The FBI arrived to an empty compound. The system had failed again. Sullivan moved from city to city, ranch to safe house. But his network was collapsing. Dozens of members were arrested in coordinated raids. Over 2,300 kilograms of cocaine, 44 kilograms of meth, 44 kilograms of fentanyl, 8 firearms, and $55 million seized. Sullivan was alone, but by the time Sullivan surrendered, investigators realized something disturbing. His survival wasn't luck. It required bankers who didn't ask questions, shipping companies that ignored red flags, and officials who chose silence over scrutiny. No single person protected Sullivan. A network of incentives did. A banker processed a wire transfer and didn't ask why. A shipping clerk saw a manifest and looked the other way. None of them thought they were protecting a cartel. They just had quotas to meet. Late one night, Marcus Sullivan walked into the U.S. Embassy. His attorney had negotiated the surrender terms. Sullivan's surrender wasn't remorse. It was calculation. His network was dismantled, his assets frozen, and Mexico, under intense political pressure, had made it clear they would no longer protect him. A senior FBI official, visiting the region on a pre-planned trip, personally oversaw the handoff. Sullivan was processed, fingerprinted, and placed in FBI hostage rescue team custody. Within hours, he was on a plane to California. In the pre-dawn hours, Marcus Sullivan arrived at a Southern California airport. 73 federal agents waited. The lead investigator read him his rights. Sullivan said nothing. Days later, Sullivan appeared in U.S. District Court in California, charged with leading a continuing criminal enterprise, conspiracy to distribute cocaine, international narcotics trafficking, 3 counts of murder for hire, conspiracy to commit money laundering, possession of firearms in furtherance of drug trafficking. Sullivan pleaded not guilty. His attorney argued the evidence was circumstantial, but the evidence told a different story. The case against Marcus Sullivan, financial forensics, intercepted communications, and cooperating witnesses. The financial evidence was overwhelming. Investigators traced $847 million in cryptocurrency to wallets controlled by Sullivan. Banking records showed wire transfers to cartel operatives. Real estate records linked Sullivan to luxury properties purchased with drug proceeds. The communications evidence was damning. During the raids, agents seized encrypted phones from a dozen lieutenants. Federal analysts cracked backup servers. The result? Over 40,000 messages directly implicating Sullivan in drug trafficking, murder for hire, and witness intimidation. This wasn't a criminal operation hiding from the system. This was a criminal operation embedded inside it. One message, sent from Sullivan's phone days before Elena Morales was murdered, read, "The accountant is a problem. She needs to disappear before the trial. I'll handle the payment." Days later, Morales was dead. 36 members arrested, 19 cooperated. One witness, courier James Holloway, testified Sullivan personally ordered Michael Donovan's murder. Holloway was present when Sullivan made the call, offering $75,000 to a Vancouver killer. His testimony was corroborated by phone records, Bitcoin transactions, surveillance footage. Every safeguard had a workaround. Every control had a price. At that moment, federal prosecutors realized Marcus Sullivan wasn't just a drug trafficker. He was a case study in how criminals exploit gaps between law enforcement agencies, banking regulations, international borders. He was proof the system wasn't just vulnerable. It was designed to be exploited. The trial is set to begin in the coming months. If convicted, Sullivan faces life without parole. Federal prosecutors will seek the maximum. In the weeks following the major raids, cocaine seizures at the border dropped 22%. Overdose deaths linked to Colombian cocaine in Los Angeles, Vancouver, and Toronto declined 17%. The Snow Kings cartel had been decapitated. The FBI's message: no one is untouchable. Not a former Olympian, not a cartel kingpin, not a fugitive hiding across borders. If you traffic drugs, order murders, believe money and violence buy freedom, you will be found. You will be arrested. You will face justice. Marcus Sullivan once stood on an Olympic stage representing American athleticism. Now he sits in federal detention awaiting trial for crimes that destroyed thousands of lives. But Marcus Sullivan is in custody. The system that allowed him to operate for over a decade is still in place. The witness protection failures, the border inspection gaps, the financial regulation loopholes, the interagency communication breakdowns. They're all still there. The people who let those gaps exist, they're still there too, still working, still paid, still protected. And somewhere, someone else is studying them, It's about the cracks in the armor of the most powerful justice system in the world. It's about what happens when criminals stop running from the law and start learning how to navigate it. The system didn't fail once. It failed every day. If you believe the system needs to be fixed before the next Marcus Sullivan exploits it, hit that like button. Share this video to demand accountability. We don't stop until the truth is out. Stay vigilant.